Welcome back. Series 2 of the Procurement and Finance Coffee Break. And obviously, Series 1 was an international success. The directors have been reaching out to convert it into a TV series. No, they haven't. But look, we had a lot of fun doing it. And thank you for all of you that sort of commented and joined in and gave us some ideas to talk about. And look, not that we're trying to sell ourselves as kind of budget consultancy, but look, if you've got a conundrum and you would like us to talk about it, Claire and I don't need much of an excuse to have a chat about sort of what's going on. So look, if you're thinking, if you've got a problem, just treat us as agony aunts, write to us and say, look, could you have a chat about this? And look, we'd be delighted to do it because frankly, it's an excuse to get online, have a cup of coffee and enjoy it. And that brings us to, I guess, to the first episode of Series 2. Can you believe episode 26 of the Procurement and Finance Coffee Break? And you know what? We're going to do the return match on scaling the finance function, and we're going to do the same on scaling the procurement function, which is not something we often talk about, to be honest. And I guess, look, when we're thinking about it, it's whether you're doing it because your business is growing organically, or more likely your business is going through a period of M&A activity, and suddenly you're not only having to bring together procurement teams from different businesses that have now been acquired, but also you're trying to work out how that enlarged procurement function can deal with the business as a whole. It presents that issue. But look, before we get into the details, look, Clay, I know you're sort of closer to the ground on this one. What is M&A still a thing, or have interest rates killed it all?
No, so we're still seeing acquisitions, but the market conditions are a little bit harder. Actually, last week, 8 Advisory hosted a build and buy breakfast event where we've actually written a white paper on what the M&A conditions are like at the moment and what we're seeing as a result of that and what that means for valuations. So if that's something of interest to you, please reach out to me and I'll send you that white paper. But in short, I would describe it as this: in the past, companies who were like on the acquisition trail and looking to buy other companies to increase the valuation of the group as a whole, in the past, just to buy when market conditions were a bit more favourable, just by buying other companies and therefore having a bigger group, you would get a higher multiple, a higher return on your investment just by the fact that it's bigger and nothing else. But now what we're seeing is that's not the case. If you buy other companies and just leave them together in a group and you don't extract synergies and value from that, and there isn't a clear business plan between how you're going to extract that value and make the group better as a whole, then you're unlikely to get the return on investment that we'd seen in previous times. So that, to my mind, makes the topic of transformation, both for all the functions across the company, for procurement, finance, obviously those are areas of interest to us, but for other areas, operations, HR, technology. So it makes the topic of transformation even more important if you're looking to acquire other companies and grow that way. So yeah, that's a little bit about the market conditions on M&A and how transformation is even more important to get the return on investment you're looking for.
Right.
With that in mind, Richard, you're a well-known speaker on the topic of procurement. You host ProcureCon and multiple conferences on topics, everything from I know you hosted one on ESG recently, but from a procurement perspective, how can you drive value through scale? What's the key points to discuss when scaling the procurement function to deliver better value?
No, great question. And much as we might like to claim that bigger isn't always better. Actually, do you know what? In the terms of scaling, the ability of a procurement function to drive value, actually bigger does make better. And what do I mean by that? It's, if you think about just pure clout in terms of your ability to influence the market or suppliers, the bigger the spend, the bigger that clout is. And I don't mean clout in an aggressive way. I simply mean in terms of attracting attention of suppliers, being able to be attractive as a customer. If you're able to bring together the purchasing power of, not just your organization, but those organizations that you've added, it absolutely will improve your ability to negotiate. But there's some other bits of value as well, which is, you ask any CPO, they'll tell you that their procurement team does a wonderful job and is markedly. But in truth, every team has got certain things they're brilliant at and other things they're not so brilliant at. Yeah. And of course, one of the things that you get by scaling is the ability to almost pick and mix technology or best practice, internal benchmarking, so that you can leverage that combined skill set and purchasing power when you're then going out. So it is just simply a case of bigger reach, bigger spend, bigger point of view about the skills and talents you've got makes it easier, I believe, for that enlarged organization to drive value. But it doesn't come without its challenges, and I guess, that kind of comes into what I'd love to hear from you, because look, much as I love standing up in front of conferences and speaking, you do a lot of hands-on transformation in procurement functions. So, from your perspective, having done it many times in finance, if procurement wants to leverage that benefit I've just talked about, what do they need to get right? And actually, what do they need to pay attention to that they just don't foul it up because, they miss something critical? I mean, what's your learning from finance on what we should do?
Yeah, so I think the number one learning or the number one recommendation I give from a finance point of view, which I think is the same for procurement, is have an integration playbook for procurement. Right. If you're going to, if it's not just a one-off acquisition and you're actually going to be making multiple acquisitions, which is often the case with acquisitions, is often the case that you've got maybe you're a private equity backed business or have got some investors who are looking for a return on their money. So having an integration playbook is, in my view, critical, because basically I would deem it as a bit like an idiot's guide to what to do when you made an acquisition.
But there's nothing wrong with idiot's guides. I mean, they're fantastic.
Right? It's basically like a checklist or a way of looking through the operating model. So when we've discussed operating model before, that you've got business processes, you've got systems, you've got technology, you've got data. So looking at all the layers of the operating model and thinking, okay, so what does it mean for how we're going to integrate this acquisition into our existing operating model? So are we going to use their systems? Or are we going to use our systems? Do we have systems that are scalable for a bigger company? Because if you're using if your current procurement processes are largely manual, that might not translate to a bigger group. No. So my number one tip is have an integration playbook. And if you don't have one and you're not sure how to go about putting one together, then that is where I would say contact consultants like myself or yourself, because certainly the consultancy I work for, we have methodologies for putting those together for companies. We have various templates and methodologies that we can deploy to give to our clients quite quickly, you know, give them a solution quite quickly. So so integration playbook is number one, and then it's about sort of you know, when you're making an acquisition, one of the critical elements is about the speed and efficiency. So what you don't want to do is just leave that company sort of standalone, operating as it was for, you know, 18 months, and then think, oh well, we better invest in scaling the procurement function now. You know, if you want to get the most value out of your investment, then that integration and that transformation should start from, you know, day one post deal completion. It shouldn't start, you know, 18 months later, or when you're thinking about possibly exiting from your investment. So those are two tips which I think are key for leveraging that benefit.
Right.
So back to you, Richard. What would you say are the key enablers for procurement integration based on your experience?
Or put it another way, what should you try and focus on to get right rather than, you know, foul up? And listen, I'm going to put actually two buckets into one. And the two buckets are whether you are growing organically and bringing in new resources, new technology, maybe different outsource partners, or whether you are combining two procurement functions as a result of a M&A activity. The same rules apply. And it touches back on a lot of what we talked about in vision and transformation and target operating model and all those good procurement and finance coffee breaks from series 1. The biggest thing for me is there has to be a North Star, right? Everyone has to have a shared vision of what it is you're trying to build. And almost, as you've just said, a very clear strategy, not a detailed plan, because that will change as you go, but a clear strategy as to the big building blocks of how you're going to do it. And those building blocks could be technology based, team based, process based, because don't forget, if you're doing an M&A, you're colliding two worlds together. And those two worlds, those two different procurement teams will have different people, different skill sets, different tech, different operating model, different processes, different rules. And you've got to bring that into one place. So to me, having that clear North Star, that clear vision and that clear strategy, everything else is actually about bit by bit engagement and integration. And don't try and do it all at once. And if you think team, tech, process, team first, you've got to make sure you're the team, the combined people who are all probably feeling a bit nervous, like, am I going to lose my job because you've got someone who's doing the same job as me coming from that company, so where do I stand? All of that human dynamic is going on. So start with the team and get that ironed out, target operating model, roles and responsibilities. And look, if the M&A involves some efficiencies, which is a polite word for saying losing people and, you know, not doubling up on stuff, get that dealt with straight away, so that you're then working with the team that you want, plus any recruitment you need to bring in. Then you can go twin track on process and tech to look at what you've both got, look at how it will or won't go together. Do you need to keep it separate for a period of time and then integrate it in the future, which is a pretty common way of doing it. But across all of that is just that really down to earth, common sense change management best practice, which is all around, you know, RACEs and information and regular communication and clearly setting out what's happening bit by bit, which we've talked about before and we'll probably revisit in the future. the summary, I guess, it's not an easy thing. I mean, even growing your own function is tricky. Combining two functions is really hard, or two teams rather, into one procurement function is really hard. And if you approach it, shared vision, clear strategy, team first, tech and process next, and integrated, and keep the comms flowing, then you're probably going to be okay. But if you don't do those things, most of all, if you leave the team floundering, uncertain about what you're trying to achieve, uncertain about their futures, you could do everything else perfectly and it will almost certainly fail because your team don't get it. So that would be my take. So there you go. So how do we conclude that then?
Thanks, Richard. So I think what we're saying, the key takeaways from this is yes, from a procurement point of view, purchasing power obviously does matter.
Yeah.
Size does matter, because
Size
you're going to
does
have
matter.
better purchasing power, better negotiation. But that does rely on having the data to back it up. So if you haven't collated your data and don't have systems to give you the data in order to show that you have the purchasing power, that will obviously be a problem. The second takeaway is have an integration playbook, and that integration playbook should be closely linked to the topic you just mentioned, is what is your vision, what is your target operating model, what is your strategy. The other tip that we had, key takeaway, is start from day one post deal. So don't wait for 18 months, because the longer the wait, the longer you are not extracting the value that you will need, because you're not going to get that value back in the form of higher multiples in the current market, just on sheer scale. And that basically the final thing that I should say is when you are on the acquisition trail, for each purchase that you make, you should have a clear business plan for that purchase and a value proposition, and that value proposition should say what how am I going to extract value from this company, and that should be known before you make the acquisition, and should be validated by the due diligence that you get performed on that company. So I think the value proposition then is a precursor to what the vision, target operating model, and the clear strategy is going to be that will help you make that integration.
Got it.
So
although I tell you what, I will add one thing. I don't know about you, but I have never been through any kind of acquisition M&A where the results of the due diligence actually match what happens on the ground when you see it for real. So double checking what you've been told as well. Anyway.
That's a good point, Richard. And sometimes when companies make acquisitions, they do like skimp a little bit on the due diligence. For example, lots of companies do financial due diligence, like are the accounts accurate, for example. But from a finance point of view, they don't often do what I would call finance operations due diligence. That's about like are the team capable? If we buy them and they're currently doing, for example, cash accounting, they have rubbishy systems, and they don't do any kind of cash forecasting. If we then acquire them and expect them to do rolling 13-week cash forecasts, comprehensive management reporting, are they going to be able to actually do that? So some sort of my advice would be to do some finance operations due diligence, so you can work out that when you give them all these additional requirements for reporting, are they actually going to be able to deliver that, or are you going to have to factor a transformational plan in post acquisition?
Well, do you know what I was going to say? Here you go, talking about finance again, when this is supposed to be all about me and procurement. But actually, no, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same, which is that I can look at what a procurement team does and I can hear about it, but until you actually see it working and you go and look at that operational level, you haven't got a clue. And let's be honest, M&As, if I'm selling my business, I'm not exactly highlighting my problems in that sale process, right? I'm selling benefits. And that means there's always, when you lift the bonnet, there is always something that you weren't expecting. So look, again, I suppose that just comes into change management and risk management. Just expect the unexpected, because it is going to be there.
Yeah. And
Anyway.
possibly invest in more due diligence, so you know what you're getting. Because if people are being kind of vague on a topic, then being vague on in response to due diligence is never a good thing. So I wouldn't say if you want to mitigate the risk, up your investment on due diligence.
Yeah, totally agree. And look, last thought, and we're going to talk about the next session in just a minute. Don't forget, if you're bringing two organizations together, they've still got their day job. And therefore, when you're talking about integrating, you're adding extra work on teams. Doesn't matter if it's finance, procurement, or any other team. How do you manage what they're doing as well as what they need to do to come together? And that actually is a leadership, really big part of leadership, to say, right, what do we stop so that you're able to go and focus, on the stuff that you need to go and do. Anyway, we're going to change gear completely for the second one, because we're going to go and look at, and this is going to be a nightmare for me, because this is going to be about how do you get out of bad habits. But you know what? I'm looking forward to the next one, because we're going to be talking about how can we come up with some really good ways of going about just our daily lives to give us time to go and do the things that we've just spoken about. So anyway, procurement scaling, done. Atomic habits for improving performance coming up next time. But Claire, I guess, look, lovely to see you. And until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.